Spring Review number 7. This is Mr. Trutna right here. We're going to go over how to do these 7 problems, and the 7 problems are going to be dealing with finding the volume of various solid shapes. So 7-1, what is the volume formula for a cylinder? Okay, so remember the volume for a cylinder is, we're going to take the number pi, we're going to multiply it by the radius squared, and then we're going to multiply it by the height of the cylinder. So pi times radius squared times the height. Okay, so what is the volume for this cylinder right here? Alright, so to find the volume, I'm going to just take the formula. So there's 2 things I need to know to find volume of a cylinder. I need to know the radius, and if you notice I have an 18 here. Well, that's the diameter. So if the diameter is going to be equal to 18, then that means my radius is going to be half of that, so my radius is 9. So my volume is going to be pi, and then I'm going to multiply it by the radius, which is 9, but it's going to be the radius to the 2nd power, so it's going to be 9 squared. And then I'm going to multiply it by the height of the cylinder, and you can see the height is 5 inches, so that'd be 5. Okay, and I'm not going to worry about the measurements until I actually work it out. Okay, now when I figure out the volume, I have 2 choices. I could leave my answer with pi in the answer, and I'm going to do that first. So if I were to just work this out without multiplying out the pi, all I would do is I would take 9 to the 2nd power. Let's move my calculator over here. You might be able to see it a little bit better. There we go. So I'm going to take 9 to the 2nd power, which is 81. I'm going to multiply that by 5. So you could say the volume is 405 pi. All right, and if you say that, that would be a perfectly acceptable answer. We put the measurements in, and it's always cubed. Okay, so that right there would be a perfectly acceptable answer. Or if you don't like that answer and you like to multiply pi out, so if we want to multiply it out, we can go 405. We're going to use 3.14 for pi. All right, you don't have to use 3.14 for pi. You could use the pi function on your calculator, but 1271.7 would be my volume. Okay, so or we could say the volume is 1271.7 cubic inches. Okay, either answer is acceptable. 7-3, so now we're dealing with a cone, and so the first question you want to answer is, what is the volume formula for a cone? Well, the volume formula for a cone is very much like a cylinder. So to find the volume, you're going to take the number pi, you're going to multiply it by the radius squared, you're going to multiply that by the height of the cone, but then for a cone you're going to divide it by 3. So really what you're saying is a cone is 1/3 the volume of a cylinder. That's where that dividing by 3 comes in. Okay, so there's 2 things you need to know to find the volume of a cone. You need to know the radius, and once again, if we looked at this picture right here, we don't know the radius. Well, we do, not directly. We know the diameter is 12, which means the radius is going to be half of that, so that's 6, okay? And you need to know the height. Okay, now in this problem, you hopefully notice that this 10 right here is not the height of the cone. This is what we call the slanted height, or the slant height of the cone. So what you want to do in the first problem here, in 7-4 is leading you to it. It says, what is the height of the cone? Well, the height of the cone, remember, goes from the top of the cone straight down so that it becomes perpendicular with the base, which is the circle here. Okay, and so really what we just created is we created a right triangle right here, where this leg is 6, this leg right here is your height of the cone, and then the hypotenuse is 10. Okay, so what you want to do is, to find the height of the cone, we have to do Pythagorean Theorem. So we're going to go x squared or h squared plus the other leg, which is 6 squared, and that's going to be equal to the hypotenuse, which is 10 squared. So we're using a squared plus b squared equals c squared, that Pythagorean theorem. Working this out, we simplify it. H squared cannot be simplified. Plus 6 squared becomes 36, simplifies to 36. 10 squared simplifies to 100. Alright, so now I'm going to subtract 36 from each side. Remember, I'm finding the height of my cone. And when I do that, you can see when these 36's cancel out, we get the equation h squared is equal to 64. 100 minus 36 is 64. So we have 8 squared is equal to 64, and then we need to take the square root of both sides of the equation, and that would give us that h is equal to 8. So what we just found out was the height of our cone was 8. So now 7-5 says what is the volume? Okay, so I'm going to just plug in the numbers into my formula. So I'm going to have pi times the radius, which we said was 6, squared, times the height, which we just figured out was 8, and then we're going to divide that all by 3. So this is going to, that right there is going to give me the volume of the cone that I'm dealing with in numbers 7, 3, 7, 4, and 7, 5. Okay, so once I have the formula, all I'm doing now is it's just a simple matter of plugging that formula into my calculator to see what it works out to. Okay, so I'm going to take 6 to the second power, which is 36, and then I'm going to multiply that by 8. Okay, so I'm going to multiply that by 8, and I get 288. So I'm going to take, so really I could say my answer is at this point, this is 288 pi, notice I did not multiply out the pi, divided by 3. You could say that's the answer right there. Unless, let's see, it is 288 when I divide it by 3 is, oh, it becomes 96. So I could actually say that this is 96 pi. Okay, and then I put my measurements in, meters cubed. So if you say that's the volume for this cone, that would be perfectly fine. Okay, but like we discussed in class, that freaks people out. People can't put a finger on that number. So if you want to multiply it out, 96 times, use 3.14 for pi, or use the pi function on your calculator, 301.44. 301.44 cubic meters. So either one of these answers would be acceptable. Okay? All right, 7-6. Now we're dealing with a pyramid. So what is the volume formula for a pyramid? So remember the formula is, it's going to be capital B. And remember, whenever we use capital B in a volume formula, that means that stands for the area of the base. It does not stand for the base, it stands for the area of the base. Then you multiply it by the height of the pyramid, and then you divide the entirety by 3. Okay, so capital B times H. And I'm going to write this over here because this is a very common mistake. Capital B stands for the area of the base. Okay, pet peeve of mine, it drives me crazy when people say, oh, B is the base. No, it's a capital B, area of the base. Okay, so now in 7-7 it says, if the height is 11 centimeters, what is the volume? Okay, so we were just told that the height right here, and I'm going to draw a line going in there, is 11 centimeters. Okay, so I'm going to find the volume. So first thing I do is I find the area of the base. Well, the base is this bottom portion, which I'm shading in, of the pyramid, and that bottom portion, although it's not marked, that was my fault. Let's assume it's a square. That's the only thing we can assume. So that means this side is 8 as well. So to find the area of a square, remember you take one of the sides and you multiply it by the other side. So we're going to go 8 times 8. 8 times 8 would be your capital B, your area of the base. Then you're going to multiply that by the height of the pyramid, which is 11, and then you're going to divide that entire answer by 3. Okay, so working that out on the calculator, 8 times 8 is 64. We're going to multiply that by 11. We're going to see what that equals, 704. We're going to divide that by 3. And I'm going to round my answer to 234.7. There's my volume. Put your measurements in, centimeters cubed. So there we go with spring final review number 7. I'll be back later for numbers 8 and 9, 10, 11, and 12.